so much. Simon's not giving up that speaker. He's hanging on to it. No, you have it.
It's mine.
It's yours. Well, hi, folks. It's great to be here and to introduce you or update you on the Nova Scotia Working Woodlands Trust. Can you hear me? Or okay? I can yell. Yeah, so I'll just dive in, and I'm going to kind of stick to script here, otherwise I might ramble on and I won't move on in a timely manner. But great to have the introductions this morning and to hear from some exciting work going on in our Woodlot year. So this new land trust is being developed in partnership or sort of incubated through the Mersey Community Forest Cooperative. So I'm a little bit far from my normal territory down in southwest Nova Scotia. The Mersey Community Forest Cooperative manages 15,000 hectares of crown land in Annapolis County. It's the old water land, the portion of it, that was created about 9 years ago to make up the community forest area. And it's piloting traditional or alternatives to traditional crown land management by balancing multiple values and practicing ecological-based forest management. It's managed by a volunteer board of directors with 2 seats for representatives for each economic, ecological, social, and First Nations, and 2 members at large. And the development of this new land trust has sort of come out of a need where we heard from the community that private woodland owners were aging and maybe uncertain of what would happen to the forests that they own after their time, and that there was an interest to sort of secure that stewardship legacy, and there wasn't currently a model to help support that. So that's really what we're all about, is to help sort of address that legacy stewardship planning. And ultimately, the trust aims to ensure that carefully managed forests remain forests for the long term by preventing conversion or overharvesting, and really to help support maintaining wildlife habitat, stored carbon, and building resilient forests and forest sector across the province. This is a quick snapshot of our team. There's myself and Matt Miller's the general manager for the community forest. So we're a small team, but we're growing. We have a few positions open right now. We're hiring a new executive director. So if you know anyone looking for work in southwest Nova Scotia, check out our website. As well, we're launching a new program for hemlock woolly adelgid treatment. So there's a growing team that's going to head out pretty soon to support some conservation for hemlock, old growth forest hemlock. So in southwest Nova Scotia to start, and we'll be moving along as the invasive pest moves north of the province. But I just throw up a little snapshot of the directors there, just to share that we aim to represent Woodlot stewards and stewardship organizations across the province. So just before we kind of dive into what is this land trust, what's it all about, how's it going to work, I just want to share some values in working with Woodlot partners that we really aim for both the community forest and the land trust to integrate Mi'kmaq values, knowing that it's such an important aspect of land stewardship and to take steps towards reconciliation. Both of these organizations are settler-based organizations. And we acknowledge that the conservation movement in Canada has largely benefited from the appropriation of Indigenous lands, and where colonial systems have historically created barriers for Indigenous people to access private lands. And so as we go forward, we commit to educating ourselves and the landowners that work with the Land Trust and through the Family Forest Network, and to listen to the Indigenous partners. We aim to integrate traditional uses on easement properties as well as 2x-C'ing into management practices. And really just to plan and hope to create opportunities to donate lands to Indigenous communities and promote open access on easement properties. And just continue to build relationships, alleviate barriers, and continue to have hard conversations. We're all in it together. We are sort of, this may not be news to any of us now, but switching some terminology around from woodlot maybe to woodlands. We recognize that the concept of private ownership was unfamiliar to the original inhabitants of Mi'kmaq, the Mi'kmaq people. And using the expression woodland stewards acknowledges that private lands may never have been legally ceded or sold to settlers. And we ask private woodland owners to reconsider their relationship with private land ownership as a concept, and instead vow to act as stewards to the forest and maintaining it as a resource for future generations. So why are we building a working Hardworking Woodlands Trust. Anyways, I kind of touched on it in my intro there. There's a few things I just want to highlight quite quickly as what we heard from folks in our community. So the majority of the land stewards are in retirement with no clear successional plans for who will manage the woodlands after their time. And there's these three primary scenarios that we see occurring. That perhaps the new owners, the children, and the next of kin are displaced from the forest, maybe moved to an urban environment or another province, and are unable to continue on or are uninterested in continuing on forest management of the woodlands. And they may be sold to the highest bidder, and then who knows what happens to the property after that. The second, there is concerns around capital gains tax when lands change hands, the new owners being faced with a big bill, and may look to the forest to cover that. And any economic pinch is tough times, inflation being so high, looking to the forest as a resource to support any economic changes or retirement, a new roof, any of those things. So really the easement serves to protect forest health and to uphold stewardship legacies and to support a diversity of revenue generating opportunities. And coming together with the Family Forest Network, Brian's going to present on that project, so you'll have a full understanding of it later on this afternoon. But working with a diversity of organizations and opportunities to support financial opportunities for landowners. So, the bottom I was very washed out, but in addition to risks of lands changing hands, some common threats to forests include land conversion, where we see in the top left there clear cut, and then in the top right conversion to agriculture or blueberry fields, and in the bottom there you can't maybe really see it, but it's really trying to represent subdivision. So it's the Malaga Lakes area in southwest Nova Scotia. So our lakefront properties particularly are of high interest for cottages or second homes, and important unique ecosites and forest ecosystems maybe get cut up and clear cut for other uses. So an interest in preserving forest health and unique ecosystems. So the vision for the Working Woodlands Trust is to benefit the woodland owners themselves as well as the community and the environment, and aims to maintain forest cover and growing quality forest products to help sustain income over the long term instead of those maybe short-term economic gains, to really build more stability and long-term economic opportunities, as well as to support landscape connectivity and continuous cover forest canopy, and to promote ecological forestry through climate-adaptive silviculture and to advance forest health and successional pathways. And for the woodlot owners themselves, the easements aim to uphold their stewardship legacies and forest health through sustainable harvesting. An easement will tie a forest management plan to the property and land stewardship's goals. A forest management plan and land steward's goals to the property in perpetuity, regardless of who owns that property down the line. And I'll touch on this a little bit more in a coming slide, but to cover the cost of these easements, we're providing an opportunity for landowners and individuals to access carbon offset markets, and any additional revenue beyond the costs of the easement will be returned back to the land steward over time. So these, let's see, where am I? These working forest easements, they'll be upheld through the Community Easements Act, which started in our province here in 2012. And within it, there is a purpose to support and protect working forests, and to date, no organization has come forward to serve that purpose within the Act. So we put our hand up and are going through the process of receiving eligible body status. It requires ministerial and cabinet approval. We've been working hard to get through the gate there, where we've been developing this new land trust for almost 3 years now and building a foundation to launch. And once we have this eligible body status, we'll be able to start meeting landowners more, assessing properties, and reviewing sort of the templates and legal documents, and begin launching. We intend to launch the land trust with a minimum of 10,000 acres. So spread across the province as an aggregated group of landowners. but just waiting on that cabinet approval. Cabinet approval moves a little bit slow, but we're getting there. So easements will be upheld through annual monitoring and stewardship, and with an endowment and legal defense funds. The trust will own lands through direct acquisition as well as accept properties for donation. So the community easement is a legally binding agreement between ourselves, the trust, and the landowners. And as I mentioned, it is tied to the property deed in perpetuity. So within that agreement are agreed practices as well as limitations to future property development as well as natural resource extraction. And the actual forest management services will be provided through that existing regional service. There's already an existing network like Cape Breton Private Land Partnership, North Nova, the Federation of Woodland Owners. I think I have a map here sort of highlighting some of the partners that we would work with to really support landowners through management planning and contracts for harvesting and silviculture, operations supervision, all of these folks being a part of the Family Forest Network, 11 organizations coming together to advance ecological forestry on small private woodlands across Nova Scotia. Ryan will touch on that later. But just wanted to note that we're working with those folks that already do those services, and that the Land Trust's purpose is really to uphold the easement. So I'll dive in really quickly to highlight the agreed practices. We'll start by thinking about land zoning. And we recognize that many woodlots are multi-purpose. In the easement drafting phase, we would carve out any of the agricultural lands, including Christmas trees. We would exclude the house or any residential zones and apply agreed practices to the forest zone only. Within the forest zone, there would be two sections: the ecosystem-based forestry or improved forest management, as well as a conservation zone or forever wild. As well, we can denote at the time any current or future plans for developing any sort of small recreational off-grid cabins or any recreational desires for the woodlands. There's a cute looking cabin there. All right, and so we break down the agreed practices into permitted, restricted, and prohibited activities. And they're pretty general. It's a big umbrella in categorizing down what maybe is ecosystem-based forest management, where the permitted activities are any of those low-impact hiking, trail clearing, foraging, any of that good stuff. In the restricted zone would be any enforced management. Would just require 60-day notice to the land trust just to maintain communication. And it includes any of the forest harvesting or new road construction or restoration projects. And then prohibited across the entire forest zone would be subdivision, liquidation, or unsustainable harvesting. And I'll touch on that a bit more in a coming slide. And then in those conservation zones, it would just allow any of the low impact permitted as well as restoration. So, I think we've been talking a lot about ecological forestry in the province in the last few years under the Leahy Review. And note that a lot of landowners have been doing this for generations. But I will just highlight sort of the definition we're going off of, is that any merchantable or non-merchantable forestry activities in silviculture that considers climate adaptivity and mimics natural disturbances while maintaining biodiversity features and ecological function. And prohibited on the easement properties would be unsustainable or ecologically inappropriate forestry practices, and it includes clear cutting, overstory removal, or the removal of permanent retention features within any forestry activity. So as the Land Trust is gearing up to launch, some of the eligibility requirements we're looking for is these early years or properties of forest woodlands that are greater than 50 acres, and where half of it is mature, meaning over 40 years of age. And it could be in a managed or natural state. It will be required that the woodlands have an FSC certified management plan with one of those partner organizations. and it's the responsibility of the landowner to maintain the management plan on a 10-year renewal cycle, as well as some of that boundary line maintenance. And some additional considerations are sort of nice to haves in the land trust are properties that support contiguous landscapes or maybe build easement clusters so that we can have larger areas of forest cover maintained. Providing any properties that provide public access or recreational opportunities, trails, mountain biking, any of that stuff, since it's a community easement to really build community benefit is advantageous. As well, any properties that have maybe a minimal human structure, no wells, pits in the forest zone, and if there are special wildlife or habitat features are always bonuses. So we know it's great, working forest easements exist in other jurisdictions, so we haven't invented the wheel here. It's wonderful to be able to learn from other organizations that have been successfully holding working forest easements in New England, just south of the border, as well as our traditional conservation-based easements. We know that endowments and long-term management is expensive, and it's largely dependent on the woodland size, the distance to travel, and the risk of infractions. And the easement covers annual monitoring, liability costs, including the negotiations and legal defense. So we estimate that the lifetime cost of upholding an easement is to be about $100 an acre. And this is where we skip to talk about carbon. So we're looking to fund all of the easements. Any folks that are interested in an easement, it's great. The carbon in the woodlands will pay for the lifetime management of the easement itself. And we're looking for the land trust to serve as an aggregator to bring together a network of woodlands, and that's where that minimum of 10,000 acres comes in. To access the voluntary carbon market today, you need to have a certain scale for project feasibility and to bring a substantial carbon credit volume to the market. So we will keep track of each property's volumes and revenue, and the revenue will cover the endowment greatly, twofold. And within the first 2 to 3 years of the 20-year payment issuance, and additional revenue will be returned to landowners. So sort of after year 3 or 4 is when landowners will start to see carbon revenue returned to them. So the carbon, this is based off of the volunteer carbon market and the federal carbon market, and may be coming online this year. So things may change a little bit, but what we based sort of how this will look is sort of based off the voluntary options that are available today. So the carbon agreement is a 40-year term, where the easement is in perpetuity. So it goes on beyond the terms of the carbon agreement. We know that carbon programs vary considerably, but when we look to improve forest management protocols, they pair perfectly with the easement and all the plans that I've already outlined, sort of the values of the land trust and the intention. And the easements and ongoing monitoring and litigation will secure the forest carbon in perpetuity. So the stewardship and silvicultural practices that promote healthy forests and tree growth, they can enhance carbon sequestration and improve stand resiliency to climate change. So this is a really quick snapshot, just started, it's based on a price guarantee. So we expect the price per carbon to actually be significantly larger than this, but I just wanted to put it up because everyone wants to know the money and how it'll play out. And it's hard to know at this time exactly what the price per carbon would be, but this is based on a price minimum. And really what I want to highlight is sort of how much money would go for a 200-acre woodlot for the endowment. And then there's some additional fees for insurance and inventory expenses. We would re-inventory the carbon every 10 years. So those costs are taken out, and then the additional landowner payout, which would come over the 20 years following. And for us as well, as the aggregator and sort of project facilitator, there's options for payment schemes or different payment plans depending on the landowner's interests and needs. few other opportunities I just wanted to highlight really quickly that the Land Trust is working on. There's other effective area-based conservation measures. It's an internationally recognized way to contribute to protected area goals under the Sustainable Development Goals. So by including an opportunity to use of those conservation zones, areas of the woodlot that are always set aside and we know we're not going to go in for maintaining it for old forest or wildlife habitat, we can have those areas recognized, and that will improve the value of the carbon credits and opportunities through the carbon offset program, as well as help support the provincial protected areas goals. It's a big definition of what an OECM, but I'll read through it really quickly. It's taking a little while. I think everyone working in OECMs is kind of like, what's going on? They're new and developing, and the implementation in every jurisdiction is a little bit different. But it's a geographically defined area other than a protected area, which is governed and managed in a way that achieves positive and sustained long-term outcomes for the in-situ conservation of biodiversity, with associated ecosystem functions and services, and where applicable, cultural, spiritual, socioeconomic, and other locally relevant values. So think of the conservation zone that I highlighted within the easements would be eligible potentially to be recognized as an OECM. And the second one I just wanted to highlight is around that hemlock woolly adelgid invasive pest treatment. So the program that's getting started is through Environment and Climate Change Canada through the Nature Smart Climate Solutions Fund. And they've agreed to commit up to $10 million in the province to support reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing carbon sequestration, while also providing benefits for biodiversity and human well-being, all with efforts to ensure that our forests, our hemlock forests, are maintained. So there's an opportunity for easement holders who may have hemlock, old forest hemlock, to have treatments in their woodlots as well. And I like to just throw this in at the end, the federal 2 billion trees commitment, having an opportunity to have funds to support planting efforts on private woodlands in support of planting a diversity of species for stand and habitat restoration, climate resiliency, and diversification. That's all. Thanks so much for listening.